Hey, thank you for that. What the hell was that? Who was that? Love that. Brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm confiscating that. Thank you very much. Yes, that's what we want. Good morning, how are we all? Wow, thank you for that lackluster response. So just to let you know, I'm Anthony. I'm here to do two jobs today. One, make sure that our speakers have a fantastic response. But secondly, most importantly, to make sure that everybody in the other three tracks gets a massive sense of FOMO, a fear of missing out, that they're like, oh no, we picked the wrong track yet again. So we'll do that warm welcome one more time, and this time we'll make sure that all the other three tracks can hear that we are absolutely in the right place. So, good morning, Learning Technologies. That's more like it. That's more like it. So, I'm Anthony. I've been working in L&D for about 20 years. Spent probably the first 10 of that doing lots of classroom training. About 10 years ago, I had this crazy idea that maybe we could help people learn in ways other than sitting them in a classroom. Maybe we could even do some incredible stuff like help people learn remotely through, incredible virtual conferencing tools and things like that. So imagine my surprise when 2 years ago, suddenly the entire world agreed with me. So who knows what the future of L&D will bring us? Well, hopefully in the next hour or so, we're going to find out. If you wanted to come a little bit further forward, you'd be more than welcome to. That would be great, or I will just come around the back and give you some of that later on. I'm loving this. You're not getting this back, mate. I'm telling you now. So it's good to see you all. Isn't it nice to be back in the real world, though? Yeah. We all happy for that. Just wanted to do a quick experiment. So I know Don mentioned that there are people from all over the place. What I would like you to do is stand up if you think there is a chance that you have come the furthest to this conference, okay? So if you think you've travelled the furthest today, I've come all the way from Derbyshire. I thought I stood a chance until Don's talk earlier on. So we've got 2, 3, any more 4. We've got a few now who think they're in the running for furthest travel. Is that all we've got? Everybody else is like Southwest London. Is that what it is? Okay. It was a tube and a DLR. I would consider that quite a lengthy journey, actually. So we'll start with Man. Where have you travelled from, my friend? Norway, right. Is there any else stood up who has travelled definitely further than Norway? If not, sit down. If you think you have, stay stood up. We definitely have people travel more than Norway. You can have that back, but just behave. Okay, so let's go over here. So where have you travelled from? Dubai, definitely further than Norway, considerably warmer, so that's good. So you think you've travelled further than Dubai? Where have you travelled from, my friend?
India,
my geography is not great. Is India further from London than? Yes, we are agree, so I'm afraid Dubai has to sit down. And further than India? You're not sure anymore? Someone's going to have to get Googling. From Toronto. Is Toronto further than India? Does anybody know? Ooh, there's a little bit of debate. Ooh, what do we think? Do we think India might be further than Toronto? Yeah, there's a few nods. We'll go with the wisdom of crowds and diversity of thinking, picking up from Matthew's theme. So congratulations. Woo! India, fabulous. Brilliant. Okay, great. Okay, looks like you're wide awake and warmed up. We had plenty of coffee this morning. You can speak back. It's not TV, this. I can hear your responses. It's real. I'm not on a screen. Look, it's amazing. Am I on mute? Can you see my screen? That's okay, good. That's the last time we're going to hear that over the next 2 days. Hurrah, brilliant, great. So it's my absolute privilege to welcome who I think are two of the best speakers on the circuit right now, and you have definitely made the best choice. So we have Amanda and Kat joining us today. Those of you who haven't met my speakers, so Amanda is co-founder of NilesNolen. She's been spending a lot of time helping businesses understand how they can use technology to work better, to help them develop their workforce. She also is a professor and has written some LinkedIn learning. So something for you to check out on the way home. Do you get commission on those, by the way? I think we may have a clicker issue. So let's do that. That's that old school. Look at that. And on top of that, she's also fluent in both Spanish, tapas, and wine. So that's fabulous. Catalina, who's also joining us, is the Chief People Officer at DataCamp, formerly at Vodafone. Again, loads of experience. Kat describes herself as being involved in digital transformation before that was a thing. I think we were probably in the same kind of weird maverick camp in those days. So I think you're up for a very, very fantastic session. There will definitely be time for questions at the end, but I think if anything crops up that's hugely important that you want to tackle, please just raise your hand. I'll run around and we'll answer questions as they crop up, but we've scheduled time for that at the end. Okay, so remembering that we're absolutely going to blow the other 3 tracks away that are up here, I want you to go absolutely wild and crazy as you welcome to the stage our speakers.
Wow, you're a tough act to follow. Do I have sound at least? Yeah, so a little fun fact, this gentleman is a comedian, evidently, like a real comedian that does stand-up. I don't know where you're performing, but maybe you want to do a plug after we're done. So I'm going to start out by telling you a little story this morning, and it's a little story about how we met. Not how I met your mother, but how I met the amazing Catalina Schveninger. So quite a few years ago, I was actually working on the EdTech vendor side, and I was at a conference, and it was in the UK, and I had heard that this lady called Kat Schveninger was coming to the conference. And of course, I wanted to meet her. I was hell-bent on meeting her, number one, because she was the CLO of Vodafone, right, which is a big company that has lots of money, and I was trying to sell her stuff, yeah? But also because I had done my homework, I'd read up on the work that she was doing, and I was really, really intrigued, because not too many people at the time, and probably not now either, had the breadth of experience that she had across the entire human resources function. So talent acquisition, talent management, all the talent stuff, yeah? And I was frankly quite worried, and I'm still worried in 2022, that the L&D function was really living in this bubble. And it was quite disconnected from the rest of the big picture of people and the broader business strategy. And I'd heard that Kat, and this was, again, before skills were a thing, I can attest to this, there were no skills libraries and taxonomies and things you could just buy off the shelf. And so she actually built one from scratch for Vodafone. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, you know, the morning's going by, Kat doesn't show up, I'm hounding the organizers, you know, I want my meeting with Kat, my company paid for this, right? I want my meeting. And finally she showed up, and I stalked her, and I convinced her to sit down with me for lunch, and she, I gotta say, I'm not intimidated easily, some of you know me, I don't get scared. And she scared, like, I was so scared of her. She had this sort of like, you know, very Eastern European, very sort of scary face, and I think she was just on vendor control, like, don't come talk to me, I don't want to buy anything, I just came for the talks, yeah? But we had a pretty good chat, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
It was good, and, you know, I had this massive brain crush, and I'm thinking, I don't think it's reciprocated, that's okay, but I'm having lunch with my idol. So that's my version of the story.
Oh goodness, you made me blush. So, my version of the story, hands up who invited once to a conference or a meetup, and you're just dreading, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be cornered by some very well-intentioned but a bit too eager vendor, right? So is it a good idea? Plus the pile of work I'll have next day, really. So that was me at stupid o'clock on a rainy morning, heading off to Leamington Spa, and to my surprise and delight, not only was the legend that is Nick Van Dam chairing the session. If you haven't read his book, go and read it. And then Miss Nolen was there, and yeah, great chat. Not only was she restored kind of my faith in vendors, right? She was asking great questions, she wasn't trying to sell me something I didn't need, and she had fantastic book full of great addresses to shop in Madrid. So, you know, the rest is history. Right?
And we spoke Spanish at lunch, actually, because she's got me beat on that. She speaks 6.
So anyway, this is what brings us today, and I think what we'd love to do today with you, we have about 40 minutes before lunch, is to share some of the experience that we both had, both on the vendor and on the buyer side, and hopefully those ideas will help you a lot of time, effort, and money, why not, on your path to skill your workforce in the right way, right? And I think the other piece we'll hope you'll get away is how you bring your best BFFs along in the journey. And by BFFs, we mean the broader talent community, the broader HR, and the other stakeholders. So that's kind of what we're trying to do today.
Great. And
It works.
now it actually works, and I'm going backwards. Okay, so the 9 levers of learning transformation. That is the title of the session that I hope everybody else is now having FOMO because they didn't attend. So 9 levers, that's a lot of levers, and Kat is a very practical lady, so when I invited her to share the stage, because again, I wanted to have this no BS HR generalist perspective, she's like, Amanda, there's no way we're gonna cover 9. And so we had to narrow it down to 4.
Can't even forget, you know, we can't even remember 9 anyway.
We can't even remember 9. So we're going to talk about 4 of them today. But in the middle of these levers, right, the one in the center is the tech. And now the tech, you know, it is important because it's the thing that connects everything else. It's the enabler. We love tech. We're geeks about tech, right? And this is learning technologies, so I hope you are too. But the problem is at NilesNolen, which is my consultancy, working with organizations, very large enterprises around the world, across sectors, the thing is, the most common mistake I see is they take a tech first, if not tech only approach, okay? And they're not thinking about all the other stuff that needs to happen around that. So, data, performance consulting, L&D skills, that's you, stakeholder management, a new operating model, content strategy, experiential learning, and talent and skills. Those are the 9 levers of transformation that we use at NilesNolen to help companies start to think about what else they need to consider especially when they're investing in technology. So I said we're going to only talk about 4. So we're going to talk about talent and skills and spend quite a lot of time on that. That's why I invited Kat to come, of course. Data and experiential learning and stakeholder management. Those are the 4 we're going to focus on today. I hope you're not disappointed and we're not missing out on one of your favorites. And then actually, if you stay to the end, if you actually stay and don't leave us, we'll have some bonus tips around what your tech vendor might not tell you based on, again, our own mistakes and our own suffering. Okay? So that is what we're going to talk about today. The tech is probably only 5% of any successful learning transformation. Okay? Oops.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, talent and skills, my absolute favorite topic. And yeah, for my since over 20 years in HR, working in different talent and skills roles, and it's really interesting. If you think about it, you know, the HR function is obsessed with talent, right? We do a lot of things to talent, right? We attract them, we hire them, we assess them, we develop them, you know, we exit them, we do a lot of things. But the reality is that, you know, if you ask talent, they would probably tell you, A, they don't even know their talent, and B, if they actually, you know, luckily they know their talent, they're not noticing any of their love to them, right? So, and the reality is obviously the big reshuffle or, you know, the big resignation, right? They're telling us loud and clear that whatever strategies we have are not landing because they're not feeling the love. So what's going on, right? If we have so much focus on talent, you know, I personally believe that it's kind of flawed by design. The reason that you know, we don't nail talent, right, and they're not feeling this love, is that we have a definition problem. Everybody in every company calls talent something else, right? When I started my career back in GE, we called talent just high performance. GE was great at dealing with the top 10. The rest were like, you know, kind of do your own thing, right? You know, I went to Vodafone, you know, talent, I think back, you know, a couple of years ago, we said, oh, actually, talent is also experts, because boy, if they leave us, we have a problem, right? So again, the definition of talent is kind of all over the place, right? So it's kind of all the same, but different, but same. So what I mean, it's a mistake by design, a flaw by design. First of all, if you look to this lovely pyramid that my friend Amanda here scribbled on the back of the envelope, obviously great potential graphic designer in the closet, is that traditionally the talent teams in large corporates are looking at the top of the pyramid, right? They deal with leaders, with high potentials, with the creme de la creme. And obviously, that attracts a lot of attention from the C-suite, right? Because they get this stuff. And as a conclusion, you know, and as a result of that, of course, disproportionate amount of money and attention from the C-suite goes to that top 10 or 20 or whatever. Whereas L&D is kind of left with the rest, right? So you're thinking, hey, if you have a talent strategy, kind of makes sense to include the rest, right? So that's one of the design flaws, right? That we are kind of looking at this, we segment this population based on, where they are in the organization, the job title, right? Or the talent title. The other one is that we still work in silos. I've been, again, in this function for way too many years, but this kind of always been the kind of the org design, right? And I think most recently you have probably a global head of centers of expertise or VP of talent and everything else, but really the teams are structured in this way, right? So notice how far away learning and development and leadership development are in the lanes, right? So wait a minute, do leaders need to be developed in a different way? I mean, do they have a different DNA? Do they eat different things, right? So if you think about it, development is development, right? Whether you're a leader or not. So that's kind of, again, the fact that our org designs are based on this. And obviously, second thing is, we also have different data lakes, right? I have my applicant tracking system where I'm capturing a lot of things when people join, and all the great assessment center data or structured interviews data is in my kind of lake, right, as a talent acquisition. And then my performance management colleagues actually have different data downstream, right? So again, by design, we are kind of having parallel conversations, and it's not our fault, right? This is how the HR, the HR teams are being measured, evaluated, and so forth. So that is, one of the fundamental things that creates. You don't have an integrated talent approach. Now, saying that, of course, a lot of companies do. And one example that comes to mind in terms of excellence, it's not a new one. You've probably read so many articles about the AT&T working future or something transformation. They started way back. They are one of the largest employers in the US with a huge problem, just like my old employer, Vodafone, of their business model being disrupted, going from an old telco to a new technology company, lacking the new skills and having a huge unskilled workforce. So what the good AT&T people said, how about we create this talent ecosystem within the company, and we force all our managers to write the job descriptions of the future, map the skills that they have right now and the ones that there is a gap, and then force them to actually have internal deployment programs. And they partner with the likes of Coursera, with Georgia Tech University, and they offered all their staff, they were up for this change, to either do short-term courses, nano degrees up to a year, but even master's degree. Now, the catch was you had to do that in your own time, right? So fast forward, they have trained 180,000 people during this, and this program continues. But actually, what's really more fascinating, I find, in that is that their marketplace made your role super visible. You knew whether your role was at risk, whether it's going to be transformed some way, and it will even show you the path of how you can find other roles and what the salary growth would be over years, right? So they made it super transparent to people, say people get reskilled because look, your jobs will be either made redundant or completely transformed. So that's one example. Most recently, closer to us in Europe, in Germany, very recently they announced a consortium of about 36 large corporates going from automotive to the Deutsche Bahn, that are joined up together. So what they're going to do, if a factory closes somewhere, they connect with, let's say Bosch connects with Continental because Bosch might close a factory, but maybe Continental are hiring that stuff, right? So they kind of have this dialogue around, look, I'm making people redundant, you are hiring them. How about we retrain them and we transfer them from job to job? What an amazing, example. And I hope other states will follow suit. And why is that? Again, the German unemployment cost in 2020 were about 68 billion. Euros, right? So they're thinking we have to do something, right? So 36 companies, I'm sure others will join up. So again, this is kind of the concept of, if you break the silos and you have an integrated talent approach, you save jobs, you reskill people, you give them another reason to stay and work with your employer in a context of a big reshuffle.
So the examples, thank you for sharing those. I think that's really helpful to bring this to life. So what we're talking about is what I like to call reskilling. Now I'm going to break one of my own personal rules here, and I'm going to coin another buzzword, I'm afraid. I think L&D doesn't need another buzzword, but I really do like the term right skilling, and I'll tell you why. The reason is we talk about reskilling and upskilling, but there's an implication there with upskilling that it always means career progression or promotion. And let's face it, that's just not necessarily the case. We hope it is, right? But a lot of times now, what we have are lattice careers. So we're moving, not vertically in organizations always, but sideways, maybe diagonally, right, from area to area. And sometimes even like Kat said, it's even beyond your own company into another one. So when you start thinking about it like that, and we consider how important this mobility piece is to attract and retain the best talent, then right skilling, I think, makes a lot of sense. So really, we need to think about three things. First of all, it's the skills that are needed for today. And this is the bread and butter of L&D. It's business as usual. How do we help people learn the stuff they need to know to do their jobs? But it goes beyond that, right? It's also about the skills they're going to need for the future. So that's where L&D really needs to have the conversation with whoever in your org is doing strategic workforce planning to figure out, okay, foreseeably, where do they think the gaps are going to be? Where are the challenges? Where are they not going to find people with the right skills that are required to make the company competitive in the future? And then finally, I think what it all boils down to is what I refer to as the supply chain management of skills, okay? So I know it's not very nice to talk about people, employees and companies as widgets in some kind of a factory, but I do think it really is a useful way for us to start thinking about this and joining up the dots between L&D and talent. So as you can see, we love our analogies, and I'm going to talk about tomatoes, or tomatoes, I guess, depending on what side of the Atlantic you come from. So imagine you are a pizza factory. Your organization is a pizza factory, right? And in order to make most pizzas, unless you like white pizza, I guess, you're going to need some tomatoes to make the sauce, yeah? Now, you can get the tomatoes one of two ways, right? You can grow them, or you can buy them, right? But it's going to take time, and it's going to take resource to do both of those things. And that is going to inform your decision internally about what makes the most sense for your factory, okay? So now on the one end, you've got the option of growing the tomatoes, yeah? But again, like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it takes resources. So maybe it takes 90 days to grow those tomatoes, and you need a greenhouse, and you need fertilizer, you need people to nurture the plants, all of these things. So you can imagine where I'm going with this analogy, right? We're talking about L&D. L&D is the growing part. Now, on the other side of the equation, we have the option of buying the tomatoes, yeah? Go out in the market, the supermarket, the farmer's market, wherever you can find tomatoes. But we need to see, well, how many tomatoes are available? Are they any good, right? Maybe it was a bad season for tomatoes.
Not after Brexit.
Yeah, or after Brexit, we just can't get them in the supermarket. I mean, Sainsbury's or the Tesco, the shelves are empty, I see on Twitter. So when it comes to tomatoes, maybe also we need the sauce kind of tomatoes, not the beefsteak kind. And I could go on and on and on with this analogy, right? That obviously is the talent side of the equation. But what we really, really need to happen is for those two things to be joined up in a very intrinsic and very connected way. Because otherwise what's going to happen is either, number one, we're going to have a surplus of tomatoes and they're just going to end up rotting on the shelves, yeah? Or number two, there aren't enough tomatoes to make pizza at all. And I can't believe it, but I'm already hungry for pizza. Okay, so this lovely picture is supposed to describe this perfect world of talent and L&D being best friends forever, BFFs, as you were saying at the beginning of our session. However, in reality, and I know there are some exceptions of companies that are, really one big happy family, in most cases, what I see anyway, again, around the world, across industries, is that talent and L&D, they're not BFFs at all. What they are is more like frenemies. You remember that term? So they kind of hang out in the same place, but they've got competing priorities, they have competing agendas, and they really kind of sort of hate each other in a way sometimes. And they certainly don't sit down for coffee or let alone a beer. So that's what we see. But we need to change this, right? I really believe L&D, is in a position now to try to drive this and make the change. How can you do that? Well, that's part of the reason why we're here, and we hope to give you some really concrete advice that you can take home to make this happen.
Right.
And one of them, data. So as I like to say, data is your superpower, right? And it's your superpower because if you don't have data, everything else is really just an opinion. So if you're going to try to bridge the gap and make talent work together with you, data is maybe a good place to start, right, Kat?
Yeah, it certainly is. And data or data, right, is like teenage sex, right? Everybody talks about it, nobody's really got a clue. And between Amanda and I, we are subject matter experts. We got 4 teenagers, and thanks goodness they're not doing it. So at least what we think.
I hope not.
But anyway, so why is it, right? So if you think of skills as the nano measure of any development, then having data on skills is the holy grail, right? You are already up to a good start. And the reality is, as I mentioned before, there is a lot of data or data around talent. We just not capture it or we forget about it. And the good example is interviews. I'm doing, I don't know how many interviews between Jesse and I and my team here. We probably have 100 interviews every week. Do we really remember, do we capture anywhere all the great skills that those people have that they share with us? No, because the second they join, right, that kind of CV is parked somewhere if you're happy, if you're lucky in a personnel file, and we forget all of those skills and experience that they brought with them, right? So that's what I mean about data amnesia. And is it a bad thing? Yeah, it is a very bad thing because you don't have the ammunition, right? And what do you mean by ammunition? Look, if L&D had all this ammunition about data, imagine the business cases that you would have, to the C-suite, right? To convince them that, look, the cost of turnover is 33% about someone's salary, right? Look, we have these skills in-house, right? And this would be the cost of taking them from skill A to skill B, because we know that we have the database. The right skilling doesn't happen, right? Because, again, you are not targeting yourself. You're wasting a lot of money on, again, skilling people in the same way when actually maybe have those basic skills. Again, so there's a lot of things that are happening when we have data amnesia. So again, it happens, and I think, Simon, it was you saying, it's upstream and it's downstream, right? It's before someone starts and then when they start. The fact that we have a lot of performance management data, right, and feedback data that, again, is not correlated with the skill data, right? So yeah, we have data, it's all over the place. We have lots of lakes of data, and also because of our famous swim lakes, this data doesn't talk to each other and doesn't tell a story, right? So again, I think we are really guilty on having a massive skill amnesia, and I think, as well I mentioned, I always remember that we have such an amazing talent pool when people are coming in, and guess what? How many of you actually identify yourselves with your job, right? Hands up. Are you your job? No, you are much more than your job, right? But kind of your employer forgets about that, right? And again, doesn't capitalize on that amazing skill set and experience that you have that maybe could be transferable to different skills and different roles, right? So that's kind of where what we mean by amnesia. And thanks goodness, I think we talked earlier a little bit about skills taxonomies. That's another thing. I'm so excited that they're popping up like mushrooms. It's a good thing. Back in the days when Prachi and I were at Vodafone, we didn't have one. We built one. And guess what? We built it, and it didn't talk to blooming success factors because their job architecture was not integratable, right? So we spent so much time and effort doing that, and then we couldn't use it in a proper digital way, right? Now there's a lot of smart companies out there that crowdsource skill data. They get them both from your company or from the industry, and they adapt and learn, right? Which is fantastic, right? So it's a very good start. Don't get on building your own taxonomy, because by the time you do it, it's already redundant. And look, we could geek away about skill taxonomy here forever, but I think there are other people, better experts than us, later speaking today. I think we have Heather from Red Thread, and we have, I think, our friends from Ericsson speaking later. So again, look out for these sessions, because you learn about skill structure, skill taxonomy, but also about some of the amazing tech that is underpinning skill taxonomies.
And interestingly, not to break the flow, but I noticed I was looking at the exhibitor list, and I was kind of surprised to see that none of these skills taxonomy companies and none of the talent marketplaces are here. And I wonder why, because I think it's all connected, right?
And now I have a sneaky chat about data camp. So, again, if we have data, what can we do with data? We can have adaptive learning. Data camp, we call it precision learning. So what is it, right? Basically, when you have your skill profile, right? You identify first your learning goals, right? You decide what you want. Do I want to be a data analyst? This is one of the most in-demand jobs right now, and one of the best paid as well, right? So I go in and I set my learning, my goals, right? And I also have a kind of back in my mind a career goal, right? I go in and I just go through a suite of questions. Some are kind of multiple options, but some are actually testing me if I can really code, so I have to continue a line of code. So going through, obviously it's adaptive, right? The better you are, the harder it gets. But at the end of this data capturing, quiz, whatever you want to call it, assessment, you're actually getting your customized learning plan. And why is that important? Time to skill is another holy grail, right? So many C-suite, again, are still having this misconception that buying is faster than building, because they don't know that actually if you do precision learning right, and again, if you know what skills are transferable and what you have in-house already, you can counter that, right? And we have examples, if you are going from absolute zero on Python knowledge, but you are someone who's really friendly with maths and statistics, it takes you about 12 weeks to either become a programmer and write your own code, or analyze a suite of data in Python and actually become a data analyst, right? But again, that if you have a precision learning behind that as well, it might even take shorter. So at DataCamp, we believe that all these kind of blanket number of days that boot camps advertise, like, oh, it takes you 12 weeks or 8 weeks, is actually not correct, because every learner is different, right? So if you do this right, it might even take you faster, right? It probably would take me 18 weeks plus to learn Python, but maybe it would take someone else who's got that math background, 10 weeks. So again, that's one of the beautiful things that we can do when you do have data.
And not only is it the time to skill, sorry to interject again, for the organization, right? The time to competence, it's a big deal, because learning is hard and it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. But it's also for the individual, and I think we forget about this, because adults working in companies have other things, they have their job to do, they have probably families, they have a life. And so we talk about, more and more hours of learning and more is more, but is it really? So when you think about being brutally efficient and actually doing, closing the skills gap in the shortest amount of time possible, that's good for the individual as well. Sorry, Kat.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, and I was going to do another shameless plug quickly, so I'm going to rewind. So couldn't talk about data without talking about Lori Niles Hoffman, my partner in crime at NilesNolen. She wrote this book quite a few years ago now, but it's still very relevant. And it's free, and I'm a fan of free stuff, so not trying to sell you anything. You can download this, and it really does teach you about how to decode digital body language of learners, and also how to be more proactive and even predictive when it comes to data, rather than always being reactive about the stuff that we push out to people. So definitely check that one out. Now, experiential learning. So we talked about talent and skills as one of the levers, and we talked about data as well. And so now we're going to spend some time talking about experiential learning, okay? And let's start by having a chat about what it is not, or what it should not be, in my humble opinion. So spray and pray. The spray and pray approach, as I like to call it, it doesn't work, people. So just bombarding employees with as much content as possible, turn on the content libraries and the aggregators, and all those are good, and I'm speaking at Go One later, I mean, they're friends. But you can't just do that, and more is not necessarily more, okay? So if you don't really think about strategically aligning people's learning with what is needed for the company and for those individuals as well, to have a better shot at staying relevant and being, growing in their careers, then we got a problem. That's also why I really hate, and I don't like to use the H word a lot. My kids scold me for that because I tell them not to do that. But the Netflix of learning, I really do hate that thing. And in 2022, I'm still in my inbox, I don't know if anyone else, I'm getting spammed by salespeople saying, can I meet you for a coffee at the show? Because we've got the Netflix of learning. It's great edutainment. And I want to crawl under my table and die. And the reason for that is because, well, first of all, Netflix, as you all know, their shares are tanking. So maybe that's not a great example to follow right now. But also because education, learning, is not the same thing as entertainment, people. It's just not the same. So the goal with Netflix, they want you to sit in front of your screen and binge on as much content as you can possibly consume because it's entertainment, and that's it. It's supposed to be fun. But with learning, what we want is actually the opposite. Remember, I mentioned we want to be brutally efficient. So we want people to go in to get the stuff that they really need. Think of it like nutrition. Yeah, it's not the more you can eat, it's actually what you need to be healthy. And then bring it back and insert it into their lives, into their jobs, to use that stuff. And actually, ideally, it should be embedded in the flow of work, but that's probably a whole other presentation. So one last thought about this, and another thing it makes me just break out in a rash, is these laundry lists of skills. And I'll mention one, but it's by far not the worst, like the WEF list of future skills. So resilience and agility and communication, are these important skills? Definitely. No question, they're super important. But what really scares me is I see so many organizations, when we think of that pyramid and they're trying to come up with a plan for the rest of the people, for the workforce, they're doubling down on buying a bunch of content about, say, resilience, and then putting it up into their beautiful LXP, turning it on, and just hoping for the best. And that really scares me, because what about, strategically, what are the skills that the company needs? So if you're a pharma company like, Simon over at Novartis, right? You actually have to be thinking about how do we make our factories work, and how do we do drug tests, and how do we do all these things, right? So these laundry list of skills, it's the gravy, but it's definitely not the steak. And while you might want to do some of that, I think it's really important to be thinking about the actual skills that your company needs. So just a few thoughts there. You can tell that I get quite excited. So experiential learning. So I just told you what I don't think it is. What I do think it is kind of going back to the basics. And so I refer to it as the new retro cool, because did we forget how people actually learn? And again, it's hard, it takes time, yeah? So throwing content on people just for passive consumption does not a skill develop, let alone mastery, yeah? So take this example, right? Imagine you have to have brain surgery. What would you prefer? Would you prefer having somebody who watched a ton of YouTube videos and completed dozens of learning pathways on their management system or their LXP? Would you want them to open up your head? Or would you prefer somebody who'd spent hours or days in the operating theater, maybe with a surgeon who was a mentor, who showed them how to do it? They maybe got in there and practiced some. They'd never seen a video, never read an article, never cracked open a textbook. I know which one I'd pick, yeah? Now in reality, it probably should be a mix of both of those things, right? But I'm just trying to make a point here. So the fact is, in order for learning to work, content alone does not develop skills, yeah? It has to be paired or augmented with experiences. So what do I mean when I'm talking about experiences? Well, things like reflection, things like coaching and mentoring, yeah? Things like, most importantly, it's practice. So on-the-job stuff, stretch assignments and projects, for example, things that'll really let people try out those skills in real life, okay? So that is what I mean by the new retro cool of experiential learning. And I do think some of the tech companies are kind of waking up to this. They're like, oh, we had the LMS, it was a terrible UX, a terrible user experience, so we're gonna fix it by throwing the LXPs out into the world. And they did kind of fix the user experience. But what about the learning experience and how people learn? So I think we're gonna see a lot of going back to the basics. At least I hope we will. All right, so next lever.
Well, so from a brain surgeon to Mourinho, okay? So that's an interesting transition. But anyway, joke aside, they are our special ones, right? Our stakeholders. And yeah, not just the C-suite, but everyone else, because if you want your learning transformation to be successful, you have to get them all on board. And yeah, unfortunately, not everybody has a Satya, right? Not all the CEOs are visionaries and they get learning, right? So when you don't have a Satya, obviously you amazing L&D leaders, you have to learn to speak their language, right? To go to the C-suite and turn them into Satyas. And how do you do that? You speak with their own language. So of course you need your data, right? So what triggers them? Numbers. If you know the cost of attrition in your department or in your company, well done you. It's about 33% industry average. This is how expensive it is when someone's leaving. Know that number and make that case, right? Another thing is, and sorry to mention the N word again, the previous CEO of Netflix, Reed used to call rockstar engineers, he used to say that a rockstar engineer is for him valuable as 10 normal engineers. So think about when the market is really scarce of rockstar engineers, they're really hard to find, they're super expensive, right there in Silicon Valley or in Ukraine or wherever they are. Think about what's the alternative, right? What, do you know your expert engineers in the company that with a bit of investment and time, right, you can get them to be rock stars, right? So those are the things that you can go to your CEOs to get them, to kind of understand. So don't go and say, oh, this is my learning, this is my learning strategy, or this is my completion rates, because they don't get it and they're not interested, literally, right? So you need to know the business strategy, the business metrics, and speak their language and show them how they can get to those business metrics with your kind of L&D and talent agenda. And another analogy, I think we're all getting hungry before before lunch. So if your C-suite is coming to you in the middle of winter and wants melons, actually you're out for a surprise, right? Because you can't really have watermelons in the winter. But what you can give them, pile of poo, manure, and some seeds, and say maybe come back in, spring or in the summer, because by then, we will deliver these watermelons, right? So manage the expectations in terms of the time to right skill, right? I'm not saying right skilling is not difficult. It's not impossible. It is difficult now, and it takes some time, right? So again, manage that expectation as well. And yeah, we love a bit of a analogy of food.
Okay, so thank you for staying till almost the end. How are we doing on time, Anthony? We're good?
Good.
All right. So a few things that we'd like to share. This is the bonus question, and it's based on, again, our own experiences having bought and tried to deploy learning technologies and HR technologies a number of times and sometimes made some mistakes. So first of all, this image of a race car, why am I showing that? Well, what I said before with the levers, tech is in the middle, but it's only probably 5% of the transformation. So a lot of vendors make beautiful promises. You buy this platform, you put it out there, it's easy, and we've got a customer success team that's gonna help you. Don't be afraid of this, right? But really, is your team ready to go? Do you have the skills on your team to drive the race car? Do you know how to make a pit stop? Do you know how to change a tire? Or are you gonna be clutching the steering wheel like at 20 miles an hour around the track? Because if that's the case, why buy a race car at all? You can probably make do with your Honda. Otherwise the race car's just gonna sit in the garage. So that's one thing. Another thing that I see a lot is there isn't a plan for day 2. It's this big bang launch, but then I promise you those learning paths are not gonna build themselves, guys. I don't know if anyone suffered through that, of just how hard it is to curate and build those things at scale. This is a problem, okay? So vendors I'm not saying that they're, trying to lie to you, but they're overly optimistic when it comes to all the work that needs to be done if you remember all of those 9 levers. So think of the race car, yeah? Another weird picture. So this one, I posted something on LinkedIn, I don't know if anyone saw it. So this is the Lion of Gripsholm, and I'll tell you a little story about this. So this interesting, copy of a lion. What happened was, in the 18th century, the King of Sweden, King Frederick I, I believe it was, he received a gift from a ruler in Africa. I guess they did business together, it's maybe the old swag, I don't know. So he gave the King of Sweden the pelt and the bones of a lion. But the problem is that his royal taxidermist had never seen a lion before, right? Maybe in heraldry, in pictures, in books, but never had seen, like a real live lion. They didn't have zoos back then, I guess. So he did his best, and this was the result. And this still is in a museum, I guess, in Sweden, probably completely freaking out a lot of children and not convincing anyone. So where am I going with yet another analogy? And sorry for mixing metaphors here, but this is kind of like companies that are trying to build tech platforms, HR platforms, learning platforms, but they have never been inside of an L&D or an HR organization. They don't know how learning actually works. They're not learning, experts. And if you look at the long list of exhibitors here, there are a lot that scarily are building the tech because, someone had a passion for learning, which is actually better than we just wanted to get a really high valuation, be a unicorn, and make a lot of money. Okay, so it's something really to think about, is do they have the in-house expertise about how people learn, or is it just another big shiny platform? And another consideration, we talked about skills. There are all these cool new technologies. I love them. I'm really excited about them. I think you should check them out. But people aren't widgets, right? They're not robots. And so you can't just expect to move them around as you will in your organization, right? Because people have agency and they might have something to say. They might leave your company if you try to do that to them. So this is, again, another little drawing that I did and had a moment of inspiration on the back of a napkin. And you think about the skills that I have, right? Now, believe it or not, once upon a time I was a bank teller in high school. Don't know why I ever had that job, but I did. So I have basic accounting skills. You know, I can count money, I can organize, bills really nicely, I can do these things. But do I want to do that? Do I have any motivation at all to work with money or even Excel spreadsheets? I do not. Does my organization, NilesNolen, need me to do Excel and accounting? Probably yes, but guess what? That gets outsourced because I hate it. I hate it. So you have to really think about where those three things overlap. The skills people have, what the company needs, and what people want to do. But if you look at the green part, and I put L&D target there, I think that's an opportunity for us. So another example, you saw that I have great aspirations to be a graphic designer, right? You saw my Sharpie pyramid, but I really don't know how to do beautiful things in PowerPoint. Is that something that would be good for my company? Yeah, because I speak out a lot of these things. It'd be great if I had great, PowerPoint design skills. So that might be an area where I could develop because I have the motivation, I don't have the skills, but it's of value to my organization. Does that make sense? So I think it's really important to not forget to ask people and to think about, as Kat said before, we are not necessarily what we do for a living, at least not right now. We've had a past life, we have hobbies. Think about the whole person and the breadth of their skills. So, 3 other just quick tips. The first one, I have seen so many companies design these beautiful ecosystems. And I love the idea of an ecosystem and not a one-stop shop and monoliths, yeah? But beware of open API promises because every vendor will say, it's fine, our APIs are open, you can connect it all. It's not plug and play, that's not how it works. So my advice would be, please show me that, show me how you've actually connected it for other companies and not a sandbox, like a real live thing, okay? And if not, you need to figure out, get a commitment in writing, in the contract, of how long it's gonna take them to prioritize that on their dev list, okay? Because that will save you a lot of grief. And this is kind of a related point, but when we talk about skills, Peter, I know you know this and have been struggling, right, to try to crack this. The skills data, it does not just magically flow from one system to another, okay? And to make matters even worse, the vocabulary that each system has, so we've got this, the off-the-shelf skills taxonomies, you probably got your your HRIS systems, you've got your learning platforms, your LXPs, they all have their own way of talking about these things. And that makes it I'm seeing some people grimace, right? So that is a challenge. That is a very serious challenge. I hope as an industry we figure it out and we work with talent also to put our heads together. Because as far as I know, and if you know of anyone, please tell me, no one has really cracked this yet. That's where we're at. So it's okay if you don't have the answer. Don't be scared. I think, again, together we can maybe figure this out. So that is pretty much all I have to say about what you should know when you talk to vendors, and I think you have a few takeaways for us, yeah?
Really quickly, so we talk about how our friends from L&D, and talent and broader HR should be indeed our BFFs. So how do you forge a friendship? We'll invite them for coffee first, right, and see how it goes. So our 3 tips, if you have time and you finally are talking and get a nice coffee at Costa with your friends from, new friends from talent, what are you trying to achieve? First of all, do your homework, right? So understand what their pain points are. So first one is check out those job boards and see how long it's taking them to fill some of the critical roles. And if you're like me, who are recruiting all the time in mobile engineers, you know that it takes forever to find a good mobile engineer. It's completely ruining my KPIs because it takes 40, 60, 90 days, right? So you go to your talent person and say, look, I can help you with your talent acquisition challenge because I know exactly, where you're struggling to find the talent. And look, I have this pool ready for you, right? And help getting them to be ready as the watermelons in the summer. And as a bonus point, if they're really happy, you can even say, and how about that, diverting some of your recruitment marketing money to reskilling? That would be nirvana, right? So that could be one insight. Now, the second insight is, do they actually, talent is hemorrhaging, again, big reshuffle, will save you with all of that stuff. You heard it many times. But is there an angle? Do we really know why experts are leaving, right? Has the talent got the data? What are they telling you? Other than, okay, it's not a great learning culture, company culture, or I got more money somewhere else, right? Do we really know what drives those experts to leave, right? So, and is there a solution in terms of, can we give them maybe a development plan that will fulfill them, and they will stay, right? So again, get proactive around that. So get your stuff together, because what talent does, obviously, they're amazing at succession planning and planning all of that for senior leaders, but they really type of forget, the bottom of the pyramid, the experts in that scenario. So again, offer these solutions, and again, pinpointed by data. And the third is, look, we talked about this so many times, right? We sound like a broken record, but think about, yes, you don't have the data in the same ecosystems, you are parallel swimming lanes, but you can actually, by starting having just a conversation every month and sharing the data, you're already making a lot of progress. Forget HR tech, forget about implementing a new system. You guys sit together every month and you go through everyone's data, and you figure out, do we know our current population, what they learn and what they're good at? Do we know what the skills of the futures are? Let's go back to the people at workforce planning, get them as well to join that coffee. So it's a really kind of simple first step. It's nothing to do with tech, it doesn't cost any money. It just starts with, getting together and, hatching a plan, right? As simple as that. It's, and it can, happen now, obviously, due to COVID, even face-to-face, happy days. So I think with that,
yeah, I just wanted to add, it's not just talent, right? It's the whole broader people function, and ideally the entire business. But because talent is probably the most adjacent, we think that's a pretty good place to start. So stay curious. You like that, Simon? So stay curious. You've got my email, you've got Kat's email. You connect with us on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on there, both of us. I also wanted to thank Learning Technologies for having us, and Don Taylor in particular, and to point out kudos to them for getting 50% women on the speaking roster this year. I think that's really great, and they haven't been tooting their horn about it, so I'm going to do it for them. So that's about that. I don't know if we have time for any questions at all, Anthony, or?
Yeah, we do. We've got about 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, wow, okay.
Straight on the front row.
Yes, I have a question. I completely agree with you that content alone does not develop skills, and it takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
But from my experience, we do the content in a structured way to the learner, or to the coworker, and then we leave it up to them to go practice, and that's where you break. That's where the break comes, and then it's not transferred into the business the way we would like it to be. So when working with that practice, how do you work? Do you work with a structured way, together with the content, that they also do get a structured way of how to practice it? Because that's where I see a lot of organizations, they have a learning strategy that is like, learning in the business, and then the learner is supposed to be able to do that on their own, which seldom happens, right?
Well, that's a lot to unpack there, right? But I think when it comes to content and putting stuff out there, it's not necessarily bad, and we do want to give people some choice and some agency. That's a good thing, right? But first of all, I think most companies feel we don't treat people like adults, like grown-ups. We really don't. And so we're not sharing, where's the business going? To your point with the AT&T example, if I want to keep my job or progress, what would be good for me to learn? So at least give people some guidance around where the business is going so they can make more educated choices, and not just everybody sign up for leadership training and for people management and for coaching and project management because they think they're going to get a promotion. Because really, do we need that many more leaders in companies?
Yeah.
Probably
I think
not.
To be specific, and I had exactly this challenge, right? Because you got your skill taxonomy, you're doing your content, and then still transformation doesn't happen, right? So a very simple example, right? So we love self-directed learning. Again, we trust people, they're doing the right things. Now, a simple things you could do, good old German system with apprentices. What is it based on? You learn the craft from someone else. The problem with that for L&D is we have no control of how that process happens. We can't capture data we don't really know. But we can actually, in the background, with talent, for example, build a new career path for all the functions, let's say engineers, because they are better at this, and say, okay, if you want to make a promotion from level 4 to level 5, you have to transfer that skill to someone, and you have to help them practice, right? So you embed it somewhere that it's still happening, yeah, and you put that kind of pressure in the system. Because it's easier for R&D to deal with content because that's measurable, it's there, you know, you can see clicks, you can see completions, but how do you really know? Yeah. Again, you don't have the data to know that they actually apply those things or they have practiced them or things like that, right?
I think that's where technology can really help, because when it comes to doing that matchmaking for mentoring or whatever, it really is that, you know, that piece that brings it together. Talent marketplaces, I think, are really powerful in that regard. I hope that sort of answers your question. We could probably, again, do a whole session on just that. So, any other questions?
Everybody's hungry
Everyone
after all these tomatoes.
wants coffee, all this food talk. Made you hungry?
I know everyone's hungry. I'll keep it brief.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the data word, obviously everybody who's working in learning or any industry or any job is aware of how important that is. If you work in a company that's got deep roots, global, you know, that big, that you can't necessarily use the best tech or just change everything overnight, or, you know, you've got the best intentions but it's just not possible. What are some of your experiences in at least starting with that? I think you mentioned not long ago, you know, that those free or cheap ways of collating the data and starting to think about those really key points that you need to know from your employees, because, you know, there's only so many surveys you can probably do and people get bored of those. And how do we start that journey without investing, you know, millions of pounds and energy into changing everyone's mindset on how to collect the data?
Well, I'd say don't spend all your limited time and resource, because everybody has limited time and resource, making beautiful dashboards that you do nothing with. One good place to start, again, download Laura's ebook. There's lots of really just very practical advice there, but you don't have to boil the ocean, okay? Sometimes we have so much data, we don't even know what to do with it. We don't know what story it tells, we're not using it. But you can do simple things like looking on the, on the internet. It doesn't even have to be a fancy LXP, and say, what are the search terms? You know, what are people looking for and not finding, for example. So just very basic things like that. You know, data doesn't have to be this, you know, thing way up here that we can't achieve without a multi-million-dollar budget.
Yeah, but could I bust a myth that large corporates, just because they have larger budget, they haven't nailed it? And I can tell you, we were waiting to implement more fancy tools, but in the meantime, we were going to good old spreadsheet, right? And if you are lucky, and again, know of some complementary skills in your department, you maybe have an analytics geek, right? That is not a data analyst yet, but can actually manipulate data, you know, in Excel. So we were running a big youth programs with 26 markets, and there was no data of how many interns and work experience were there. So we went back to Excel and created this amazing data lake, right? By getting that Excel file to be kind of collaborative, and I had a young person in a graduate department who was kind of doing that for us, right? So again, there's a bit of a myth that, you know, at fingertips, you know, all this amazing data, you know, dashboards and stuff come. It's not the case in most companies. But they talk a good game, right? So I think you can go back to good old Excel as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, most companies don't have the luxury to have the headcount for a dedicated data person for learning, but you can maybe bring in someone, you know, from an agency outsourced that can dedicate some of their time, or like Kat actually said, go to the closest university down the street and who's studying data and see if anyone wants to do an internship for you. You might find that you can get someone that doesn't cost you anything. It's a learning experience for them, and you get some of their expertise. So those are just maybe a few places to start. Yeah? Yeah?
Hi, fantastic session so far. I had a question about the LMS and LXPs. Most corporations, despite the 9 levers of transformation, they come back to the LMS, to the LXPs, and that's how their learning is driven. It's around that periphery. The question is, why don't you think, why isn't the adoption better? And why aren't companies moving away from LMSs and LXPs despite all the talk? You know, we still have most exhibitors here are LMS companies, and we do the same drill over and over again. So where do you see, is it lack of innovation, risk appetite?
No.
Yeah, just
No.
some questions
I think
there.
the single most important reason why we're not getting the engagement that we would like to get, let alone ROI and impact from these technologies, is because we haven't answered the question, what for? What are we actually trying to do with the tech? So we can have tech from years ago and do a much better job if we know what we're actually trying to achieve. So what is your business strategy? What are the goals? What are you actually trying to do? What gaps? What skills gaps? Right skilling, remember? What are we trying to do? And so what I do see, vendors are not helping, but it's not totally their fault either, because a lot of L&D teams go and they say, I want statistics on MAUs and WOWs and hours of learning and completions, because that's what I'm being measured against. Right? I'll get my bonus at the end of the year if we have more hours of learning. It doesn't matter. That tells me nothing about, is the company effectively right-skilling their workforce? Are they closing the skills gaps? So I think, at the end of the day, this is one of the reasons why people that are not in L&D, they don't have such a great opinion of their corporate L&D department. It's known as the company that's making me go through that click, next compliance thing. They're not, right? And the reason is it's not aligned with really what's going to help them in their life, in their careers. And so you've got these platforms. Another reason, sometimes just search and discovery doesn't work. You can't find what you're looking for. It's not relevant for me. There's lots of reasons. So maybe they could innovate a little more, but I think really it's a deeper problem about not being connected to business purpose. Anyone else? Sorry, I got on a bit of a soapbox there.
I think we had a question here, Amanda.
Yeah?
Super quick one, and maybe it's in the book.
Maybe.
So when
I didn't write the book. I'm just selling it.
Thank
I'm
you.
kidding.
And it's free.
Sorry?
And it's free. So
Yes, it's free.
When the right skilling is happening, so how to understand that it is actually happening from the data, what the KPIs are, what is right.
That's a good question. So another thing, even if you're doing it properly, this right skilling thing, what I often find is we're not measuring the baseline. Where's our starting point? And so we roll out these great learning programs, and maybe they actually are closing skills gaps and they're achieving goals that really matter for people and for the business. But if we don't know where we started, and another little hint, A/B testing, having test groups, that's probably a good idea. So if you have two groups, and it's not a perfectly controlled experiment, I know, but it's better than nothing. Well, group A, we put them through these learning experiences, and their time to competence was reduced by X. Can we really chalk it up to learning 100%? Yeah. But we can, tell a story about that. Meanwhile, group number 2, they didn't get that. And really that's the only variable that's changed. So maybe our right skilling program had something to do with it. But if you don't measure the baseline, you can't tell the story at the end.
And the other, I think we talked about it earlier. So one is, if you can correlate that with business outcomes, amazing. That's it, right? Because you can demonstrate that this right skilling has driven business outcomes. But in the absence of that, at least you have internal mobility. So if these people have moved from job A to job B because of the right skilling programs, that's also amazing, right? Because you filled kind of the talent gap, you stopped the big reshuffle, and again, you can claim that credit, right? The reality right now, Indeed doesn't really claim a lot of the credit, because again, they get a lot of people that are enthusiastic and engaged because they love the learning, and that's kind of the ultimate measure.
And we spend way too much time talking the language of learning and about learning objectives, right? Who cares? I mean, really, it's not a charity. This is workplace learning. So what is the business goal we're trying to achieve? Yeah? Start from there and reverse engineer it. And then it makes it all a lot easier, I think. Peter, you had a question? Not anymore?
One over here and one over here.
Okay, thanks, Kat and Amanda. Can't resist asking a question. Actually, it's your opinion I'm after. Do you think learning impact measurement is dead? I.e., 4 levels of evaluation, Brinkerhoff success case measurement, is that now replaced by skills gap analysis and by skills progression?
Do you want to answer that? She's just like jumping up from her seat over there. That's fine with me.
This is just an opinion piece,
think?
right?
What do you think it's dead?
I think, on an intellectual level, I wish it wasn't dead, because I think, we are all learning geeks, so we like that piece, but the reality is the businesses are telling us the ultimate, nano measure of all development is the skill, right? So I think, again, we all love learning theory, right? And we obviously believe that, that's still great to be in the fabric of all the interventions we're doing, but ultimately the measure is probably towards skills. And again, it's a necessity, right? It's where the workforce is at right now, it's where the economies are going, and we kind of have to follow that path. And it makes us, in a way, it's easier for us, right? Because ultimately, if we get our data in order, we can actually demonstrate that impact, right? We just need to get better at that. What do you think?
What do you think? I don't think it's dead.
Yeah.
I don't think it's dead. I honestly, as long as we're talking more about connecting what we're doing to stuff that actually matters to people and that's going to help keep them relevant instead of being made redundant, and the companies that employ them as well, I honestly don't care. I really don't care. Call it what you will. I think we spend a lot of time in this industry changing words.
Yeah.
Like Kat was saying before, it's Learning Technologies Conference. Should it be the Reskilling and Upskilling Technologies Conference? But does that mean anything different? Are we doing anything differently? Hopefully we shared a vision of how we think it should be different, but I'm not convinced that the industry is really there yet most of the time. So call it what you will.
Good.
Yeah. Maybe that's,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I've got a question maybe from the basics. So if you're building the L&D department and you're coming in and there is no data to use and there is no baseline, and at the same time the business objectives are changing quite often, how do you speak to the C-level and convince them that this is the development?
You have an amazing opportunity. You haven't inherited all of this legacy software and inertia and people that have been doing, age-old instructional design, right? That's great. Congratulations. But you do have a baseline, because the baseline isn't learning. The baseline is actually where people are in the company, how they're performing in the company, what skills they have, where are the gaps, like I said. So just, pick a group. And don't boil the ocean. This sounds really scary, but you probably don't want to tackle the entire organization at once. Most of you here are enterprise, I'm guessing, kind of larger sort of companies. So if you try to come up with a plan for everybody before you start, you're never going to get started. So just pick a group, start there. And with data, like I said, again, Lori's ebook has a great list of suggestions. It don't require investment.
Thank you.
Cool. I think that's all we have time for. So just before we do depart for lunch or get your copy of signed Michelle's book, can we give one more FOMO-inducing massive round of applause for our speakers today? I'm sure they'll both be around over lunch, and if you're really lucky, you'll be able to ask them a question just as they're putting their fork in their mouth, and it'll be beautiful. Have a great lunch, guys. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you maybe at one of the other sessions later on. Thank you very much.